Okay, great. So now if you can start talking about yourself, tell us more about, your journey within the sports realm.
So I guess sort of if I work backwards, so I'm now the full-time managing director of NSE, which stands for National Student Esports, which is the official university body for esports in the UK. For the last nearly 7 years, I've been managing director of Sport Industry Group and have just recently moved to an advisory role with Sport Industry Group. And Sport Industry Group is a little bit like the sort of unofficial trade association for the sports sector in the UK, but very much with a global reach. And so we're known for our editorial daily news, our networking events, Sport Industry Next Gen, which is a leading professional development program for the sector. Potentially best known for running the Sport Industry Awards, which is the largest commercial sports awards in the world. And this year just celebrated its 20th anniversary. Prior to that, I have always worked in the sports sector, and I kind of come from a sports communications background and worked at a number of different agencies for best part of a decade. The last agency I was at was IMG, and I was director of PR and social media in what was the consulting division, and is now sort of transformed into 160over90 in its latest guise. And clients would include a huge amount of sporting sponsors, events themselves, international federations, national governing bodies looking for common strategies, and sometimes just straight up sort of sports brands and sort of more traditional sports PR. And that's kind of, that's my sort of background in sport.
Oh, very similar to my, because I'm also from the communications field, and it's pretty great. And also, Alex, past 1.5 years and almost going to be 2 years now, haven't been quite productive or quite good, to say it mildly, because of the pandemic. And of course, sports industry is one of the worst affected industry globally because we depend on events, we depend on live matches. And so what do you think, have the organizations, become more innovative within these past 2 years, to put their product in front and to engage more fans to the sports?
I think we'll probably start seeing more of that coming out now. I think the immediate focus for a lot of organizations was simply survival. If you're talking about the sports bodies and the operators of tournaments and leagues, for a lot of the lower, certainly at the sort of mid to lower level, their main immediate focus was on how on earth do we actually make sure we're here at the end of this to think about how to be innovative. It is also harder for large organizations that have responsibilities at multiple levels, because they might be running a league and trying to engage fans at one level, but also at another level they'll be in charge of delivering grassroots sport for just mass participation of sport and all the social benefits that provides. So I think there has been a huge amount of sort of attempts to be innovative. I think what's also interesting is seeing the not saying it was all created during lockdown and during the pandemic, but the sort of innovation that comes with new formats. And there's a sense of freedom, actually. If you're creating a new product, you can start with a product that's effectively built for the modern day, whereas if you're in charge of a sport which has hundreds of years of heritage, it's much harder to adapt quickly. And often those organizations have multiple stakeholders and often, for the best will in the world, quite a lot of bureaucracy, so quick and fast-paced change is not always easy.
That's true. And also, but there are still a lot of organizations who've managed to, because I've been speaking to a lot of them, and they said the pandemic has been the busiest time for them because, they've been working on new concepts, trying to get more onto the digital side. And, of course, now you've joined esports segment. So that's also a pretty growing, segment. So these are some of the segments which have really shot up, especially esports and gaming, So what do you have to say about that? Are these sectors here to stay, or do you think as we recover gradually and, live tournament gets back how it was prior to the pandemic, esports will take a backseat?
directly on esports, no, esports definitely won't be taking a back seat and will continue its rapid rise. I think there's esports has been around for a long time pre the pandemic.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
cool.
yes. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. There's yeah.
No problem. Yeah, so esports has been around a lot longer than the pandemic, and it's certainly here to stay. I don't think esports itself wasn't immune to impacts because budgets were hit, and that itself will affect esports. And there are a huge part of esports itself is physical events as well, and that's often the pinnacle. So and players' abilities to travel and players themselves as individuals being impacted by COVID are all factors. But I think esports will sort of continue in its huge growth. I don't see it for me, it's not a competition or sort of an either or. It's not esports or esports. That's not the fight for fans' attention. Esports is as much as a kind of competitor for sports fan attention as is any other sort of anything else that they might choose to do with their spare time, whether that's watching Netflix or engaging in other activities and hobbies. So yeah, esports will continue to grow. I think there's a lot of people still trying to work out what their space is and what their play is in esports. For us, we're all about at NSC, we're all about the grassroots community and supporting that student community. And a lot of people in esports are focusing on the big eyeball numbers of it's so attractive. You see in these reports with somewhat surprisingly large reported numbers of people around the world watching esports, and there's a natural fixation on that because with that becomes media interest, becomes that people think of advertising, the advertising dollar, but there's a lot of interesting spaces for us. It's about having an active player base, and we've now got the largest grassroots gaming community in the UK, where the numbers are nowhere near the crazy numbers of you might see for sort of global events, but it's a different proposition for partners, whether they be endemic or non-endemic sponsors or other people who are interested in this student community, about knowing exactly who these people are and how long they're playing. They're often a hard to reach group, and that's a kind of core community that we're looking to support, rather than it's the active playing rather than passive eyeballs.
Okay, and what is your role going to be? I mean, you must have already started now. So what will be your focus areas? What are you planning to, do with your new position and the new organization?
Yeah, I've so NSC is sort of about 4 years old, and I've had some involvement when the Benchmark, who's our parent company, created the business. We did a partnership with Bucks, which is British universities, colleges and sports. It's a bit like the sort of UK's equivalent of the NCAA in the US, and we partnered with them to create this official body. And now I've been doing a dual role since the turn of this year, so I've been working across both Sport Industry Group and NSE. For me, I'm lucky to join NSE with a really brilliant team in place who are fantastic at sort of delivering for our community across our core product, which is the British University Esports Championship. So that's continuing, and now we're just going into our new season. Student sign-ups are happening, and there's a growing community around that. And then there's a lot of initiatives we put around the community as well. So I'm supporting and helping the team develop that. And then new areas that we're looking at of particular interest for us is one is about the alumni. So we're now at a point where we've got a good group of alumni who've been at university, have now left, but have still got a sort of strong affinity with us as an organization. So it's how can we help them? What can we put in place to allow them to play esports? Not because they're trying to be the best player in the world, but for them, it's a huge part of their social community. It's social cohesion for them. They had it at university. How can we continue to help them have it as they venture into the world as young professionals? So that's a big focus for us, and there's lots of sort of opportunities around that. And then the other area is addressing our community as well and giving that a bit of a refresh. And how can we make that as constantly never get comfortable and always make sure it's as we have got as many offerings as possible for every single person that might be part of that community, to make it as welcoming and diverse as possible. And that's something that everyone in esports, and frankly in sport, needs to think about more. So that's a growing area. And then a third area for us would be when we first started with NSC, there was a bit of I guess reticence from some from people who didn't really understand esports, and certainly with the name itself, and it's not sport, and it's a bit like we touched on earlier, seeing it as a potential competitor from traditional sport. And a lot of universities had a really vibrant community within their campus, but they just didn't know about it, or they weren't really sure what to do with it. And so sort of, I wouldn't say they ignored it, but it was kind of just left to one side. Now academic institutions understand the huge value that esports has on campus, not necessarily because they offer esports degrees, but just because of the benefits it brings to students, both in terms of technical and social skills, and just general enjoyment and sort of happiness. So they understand that they need to make sure they've got a good provision of esports, and what does that look like? And an immediate assumption is, well, we need to spend, hundreds of thousands of pounds on a set of computers, but they don't really know what that should look like, how it should look like, and everything else. So we're now starting to work with a number of academic institutions and groups and universities in the UK and internationally who have seen what we've built with NSE and are sort of looking for some advice about how and what they should be doing in this space. For two main reasons: one, to provide for their current student community, but two, also to help attract admissions for future, and especially the UK universities that are very interested in international students from India and from China, where they have a lot of international students and they pay a higher fee, so they're an attractive student to the UK body universities. It's having a good esports proposition is really attractive to those students, and we see it in the UK as well. Sorry, go on.
No. I think it's a great prospect. I mean, it has great prospect because I'm from Sheffield Hallam, and the kind of we're pretty big on sports, as you know it already, sports science or just sports in general. And like you said, yes, lot of students are into esports nowadays. And especially Indians have taken it very seriously. Some of them, esports, and I think organized, structured way of allowing them to play will only help not just them but the university and the entire community in general. So I think that the thought you have and the approach you guys have taken, it's pretty relevant and it's going to bear returns for sure.
Yeah, I mean the biggest spike in traffic we have on our website on nsc.gg by miles is on A-level results day, because students sort of know for sure what university they're going to, or if they're going through the clearing system here in the UK and they're looking around at what offers, they're checking out what university they could go to, and they want to see what, how our website is the place to go to see how good your university is at esports, how they fared in the British University Esports Championship. And so we see an absolute flood in traffic on their level results day, because they're trying to find out about their university, and it's that increase grows and grows each year.
That's pretty good. But also, I think, Alex, for you, moving on from SIG to full-time biz, have there any challenges? Because I'm sure, you're learning every day at the job. And this is also, reaching out to students. And it's because thought process, not many are very sure. There's some confusion. There's not a lot of surety or stability. So what have the challenges been for you, Alex, or rather going to be?
I mean, for me, you're absolutely spot on. It's a really good question. For me, I've gone from an industry that I've grown up in, and now I'm working in another area with a very different community. I mean, the common threads, there are definitely transferable skills, and I'll touch on some of them, but the common at a baseline, it's nurturing a community. One was a sport business community, and now it's a student community. I was very much part of and from and remain part of the sport business community, but it's a lot, I'm not a part of the student esports community, so my role is different, and I don't try to be a part of the student esports community. We have amazing people in our team who have come through that process and live and breathe it, and are really sort of in there with the community and understand everything that they do. So I'm not there to kind of play that same role, because I wouldn't be any good in it, and that's not a good use of my time. So I've gone from an area of sort of knowing lots of people in the community, in the sport business community, and using that to help us as a business and help our partners and help grow the network, to much more be looking at it from a sort of slightly different level and thinking about what are the sort of opportunities for NSE and for the student community, what are the commercial opportunities that we can bring in and support us as a business. But ultimately, everything we always do is it's 100% student first approach. So any partner that we work with has to really proactively demonstrate to us how they can add value to this community beyond just the financial backing, which is important, but also what can they do to help an individual or student or the societies that universities develop. And then it's about what are the new opportunities for us, and I touched on earlier some of the 3 new areas or sort of growing areas that I'm pushing more on. We've got our kind of really core foundation of the British University Esports Championship, and that will remain a bedrock of what we do. But what else can we get into, and where else are the opportunities that might be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line? And so that's really a big area of what we're doing. And there's lots of, in the world of in any business, and especially in the world of esports, there are a lot of conversations that fly around about potential partnerships, JVs, mergers, and acquisitions. And so I'll be sort of assessing what's relevant of those, and if there are useful and good areas for collaboration with others. So I will be, I'm not sort of as front. I'm definitely not as front facing in NSE with the NSE community as I was with Sport Industry Group. So I'll be much more trying to take some things that I've learned from the sport industry and my experience over to esports. And likewise, esports is there are so much and so many great things that it has done. I'm speaking very widely here, but it's done and created from a sort of digital first perspective. And those are lessons that can go back to the sport industry, and I remain an advisor to sport industry groups, so I can hopefully cross-pollinate between the two.
Yes, I think cross-pollination, it's the word, because there's so many opportunities within these two fields where you can, grow further. And talking about that, you mentioned about commercial opportunities. So are we looking at NSE partnering with, say, clubs who already ventured into esports, because they might, they'll attract like a bigger audience. Hypothetically speaking, Manchester is a hub for students with so many universities there, and both the clubs are quite active in terms of esports. So will we see partnerships, similar partnerships where you are approaching or working with a club to just grow or raise awareness about esports and helping more students to take part in it?
It's not high on our list of priorities. I think there are. It's not that we wouldn't investigate it, but there are. First of all, the natural inclination for most sports teams to be involved in esports is to be involved with a video game that corresponds to the sport that they are. So football, you're talking about the two clubs, and playing FIFA. Now, FIFA is a part of our community, but FIFA is not a core esports title, and is not a core esports title amongst our community. And so we'll be open to doing more in it, and we're, as part of our community refresh, we're looking at what we do in that area. But I think a lot of sports teams felt, a few years ago now, saw this rapid growth of esports, or more so, it became more prominent to them. It was sort of not on their radar before. It became on their radar a few years back now, and there was a rush to think, well, what do we do in this space? And so it was almost, I think some of them would have done it a lot more strategically than others, but there was a bit of a sort of a land grab. Well, let's get quick, let's get some players and let's put a team out. And so we can say we're doing things in esports, we'll say we're doing something, and whilst that's happening, we'll figure out what it is we're actually doing and why we're doing it. And there's lots of people doing things in esports, and not all of them are making money, and not all of it makes sense. So I think certainly not closing the door to it, but it's not a primary focus for us to team up with sports teams. But we are really, we test titles with our community. We listen to them a lot. We're constantly surveying them and asking for their feedback, both formally and anecdotally via our sort of Discord channel and others. So it's never say never, but it's not number one priority at the same time.
Okay. And similarly, I think you're right. Everybody's raced for esports now. Similarly, they're racing for NFTs. That's another new trend we're seeing, and cryptocurrencies and NFTs. I have tried to understand this segment, but I'm not very sure whether I do, because I've spoken with people like Zilika and crypto and who are venturing into, these fields. But Alex, if I were to ask your honest opinion, because you've been in the sports industry so far, does the concept of NFTs, does it excite you, or is it a fad, or is it just something which is quite unique, which might work?
I think we'll only know the true answer to that with the test and time and the beauty of hindsight. I understand why people are investigating it so thoroughly, because not just the commercial teams, but everyone is trying to think about where the new form of revenue is coming from, and what might that look like, and that people don't want to miss out on opportunities. So it makes sense to investigate it. And similar to you, I don't think I would profess to be an expert in either area, but the basic premise of it I understand and makes sense. Whether I personally am excited by it as a fan is a different answer, but I understand it. I did, unhelpfully, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I did see a report about that was certainly suggesting that the sort of the values of exchanges, and even just the searches online for NFTs have dropped rapidly since it's sort of first burst on the scene. So would suggest a decline, but I still think there's a lot of people investigating kind of where that might go. I think it may be something that continues for some time, whether it's a kind of a core focus and it's going to be a core driver of revenue for many organizations that they hope it to be. I'm not sure. There's certainly some headline grabbing figures that are being sold of, even outside of sport, but just sort of various memes that are selling for crazy amounts of, well, seems like crazy amounts of money, right? I guess we'll have to see what the subsequent sales are and see if they hold their value.
Okay, Alex, my last question is going to be, because you'll be heralding entire NSE. Are there any special provisions where you will try to, for women, attract more women players, more women to the sports? Because, like, whenever I try to learn it, my brother's like, "You're not as fast as we are. Can you just please stay aside and just let us play?" So I mean, this happens at a professional level as well, I've been told. So will you be, coming up with certain initiatives, campaigns to attract more women to the sport?
Absolutely, and it's something I alluded to earlier, and I'm not sort of proactively shouting about it too much yet, because I'd rather come back and report some improvements. But we have a predominantly male player base, but there are some encouraging signs there. So we're overwhelmingly male in our players, but when it comes to leadership positions within the student societies, the ratio there is much better. In fact, so it's probably sort of 4-to-1 male to female in leadership positions in the societies, and closer, it's a lot more male dominated in the player base. So what that's telling us is there are some women, lots of women within the community who are really keen to be involved, and are very prominent and powerful figures within the community. They're the presidents and the vice presidents of some of the biggest and leading organizations that we have within our community and the student societies on campus. So how can we translate that into more players taking part? We also have, there's some other encouraging signs. One of our programs we run with our headline partner Intel is called Intel Future Gen, where effectively we take a small cohort each year from our community who are interested in pursuing a career in esports, and it's a bit like a professional development program for them for the year, where they get to meet industry experts and so on. So that's 50-50 male, 1-to-1 male to female on that program. But I really want to shift that male player base, and there are things that we're doing. So as part of the community overhaul, we have a sort of women and non-binaries initiative where we're creating new events to specifically for people to feel in a safe space, not just to compete though, however, but actually to learn about the titles as well. Because a bit like you sort of alluding to in your question, providing just a sort of a place for women to play is great, but also it's actually how to learn about the sport, learn about the community and get involved in an environment that they feel comfortable in. So that's definitely an area for improvement, and one that I hope to sort of report back more on in due course. The one thing I will say that just to add to it though, the advantage of and this is part of an attraction for commercial sponsors, especially those from outside of esports. The advantage of university esports is an element of sometimes esports has a reputation for being a sort of some of the language and things used is not as welcoming as you might expect. We are so strong on that with our code of conduct, with how people have to adhere to the code of conduct and sort of pledged to each single element of it, but also there's a huge amount of accountability. Every single person that plays in our community is linked via their student email address, and we re-verify those email addresses every single year. So there is no anonymity in student esports. And not that I want it to kind of control the community via sort of potential kind of repercussions, but they're there to play amongst friends. For the universities.
Okay, that's cool. So thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. I'll transcribe the entire thing. Just give me like 2-3 days, and I'll get it back to you. And you can have a look. By the way, I also work in sport. I'm not sure if you know about it. Do you know about it?
No, tell me more.
Work in sport. I work in sport. So I work in sports. So basically, I work with this guy called Huao. He's a former FIFA Masters, and they're based out of Switzerland. And I'll send you more details about them, because they. So it's basically a jobs platform where we publish a lot of jobs.
I think I have.
I'm sure you must have.
Yeah.
I'll send you a link. Not a problem. Okay. But NSC sounds pretty great. So you're based out of London, correct?
Yeah, so it's the same parent company behind NSC and Sport Industry Group, and a number of other businesses as well.
Okay.
So I was working. So that's how I was able to do both, if that makes sense. So the parent company is called Benchmark, and so we run Sport Industry Group, NSC. We have an organisation called Beyond Sport, which is effectively has a is this kind of global platform for sport for positive social change, and gives out grants on behalf of various funds to grassroots projects around the world that are using sport as a vehicle to improve lives in disadvantaged communities.
That is brilliant, because I am based out of the biggest state in India, and the entire reason I came here was to start a grassroots program for backward community, and especially for girl child. Like, I wanted sports as a vehicle of change and more women to take up sport, because I'm being a former athlete. I've grown up here, and I've grown up in a very, very small city where we had no sports infrastructure at all. But now the population is 240 million of the state, but yet we just have 2 Olympic medals from the state. I mean, and which is really horrible.
Awesome.
So I'll definitely check that. So I want to start something for grassroots sports, and because I work with the government, there's a lot of support to me. But I just don't want to start just for the sake of it. I wanted something sustainable, which works, with bureaucracy and everything, it's very time consuming. But thankfully, because I work within the system, it's a bit easier for me. So we are working currently on this. I'll share the presentation with you, where we're going to have sports grassroots program in every district, and we want more women to participate. And we have a culture where women and men don't mix, or girl or boy, they don't mix. So we want to break that also, where we get them to play together, and just have anyone can play anyone. It's not like a men's category or a women's category or a girls category. So this is something I'm working. Yeah, so this is something I'm working on, and maybe I'll reach out to the We Are Benchmark.
Yeah, I've just sent you the kind of the We Are Benchmark website is a bit out of it's being updated at the moment, but at the very least it gives you a flavour of the different businesses. Beyond Sport is the one I was talking about. It's really interesting what you're saying, and obviously there's a lot of work to be done. I think there's I always find it really interesting. It's not my area of expertise, but I've obviously worked very closely with, worked closely with them for a while as a sister business. There's so many organizations out there. It's really interesting to hear you say that you want to create your own thing, because I think that's brilliant. I do, and this is personal opinion coming from limited expertise. I sometimes wonder if so many people start their own, as to whether like people could actually just work together with existing organizations, but that's dependent if there is an existing organization, and if there is,
Exactly.
if it's doing the right thing, or if it's set up properly, or if its intentions are as good as they should be, and all the rest. So.
Yeah, so that's what we don't have in the state. I mean, imagine 240 million people, and we still don't have any structured organization. We're just doing grassroots work. And I know it's because